Hello students, today we are going to study the poem Invictus by William Henley. The poem is prescribed by the Nagpur University for BCom Part 1 Compulsory English Semester 1. It is prescribed for both the English medium and Marathi medium also. Let us have a few lines of introduction on the poet of the poem Invictus. The poem is written by William Ernest Henley. He was born in 1849 and he died in 1903. He was a British poet, a critic, and editor also. He suffered in his youth from tuberculosis, and at the age of 16, one of his legs was amputated. When he turned 25, he became an inmate of a hospital in Edinburgh, and from there he started writing poems on the current fate of his life. So that doesn't stand for his belief in the God, but rather we are here to consider that he is during his stay in the hospital, he was the one who wanted to defeat the concepts of fate and belief in God. But that also doesn't mean that he was an aesthetic. He was a man who was non-believer in the God, but he rather we find that the poem projects the unconquerable will of a person who was continuously caught in different difficulties since his younghood, and we find that his poetry is full of all these we can say a bunch of energy that oozes out from the soul and mind of a human being. We find that these poems were actually labeled in a collection including in hospital. It was written between 1873 and 1875, and a book of verses was published in 1891. The subject matter of the poems was actually titled under hospital poems, and they are actually the observations of his plight or the plight of many other patients in the hospital beds around him. Rather on, he in the next phase of his life, he became an editor of one of the most famous journals in Edinburgh, and this poem is basically talks about you know how a situation or a difficult, perhaps the most difficult situation to be handled. Most often we find that our situation seems to be the most difficult phase of life. Most of the time we feel like that because it has because we decided that it is the most difficult situation, while you look at others that how do they live and the manner of survival, you will find that when compared, your problem is perhaps the least noticeable problem. And that is how we are generally caught in some kind of conflict with life. And as you all know that when the conflicts remain unhandled, or when they are mishandled in absence of any counseling, we find that people tend to end their life. But in case of William Henley, we find that right from the age of 16, he has been continuously caught up in one or the other difficulties. And the youthful period of his life was spent in a hospital, and he was surrounded by many other patients also, perhaps, towards the verge of the end of their life. But he stood firm and he trained his mind not to notice, perhaps, all those problems, or not to even feel that his problem or his amputation of one leg that made him crippled was perhaps the most difficult situation. And this is how he handles his appearance in the poem. He also handles the tone of the poem, and at no point of time, Henley makes you feel that this is not perhaps the right way to handle. At the end of the poem, you will find that this is perhaps the best way to handle. I mean, I will suggest that when you are caught in some difficult situations, read this poem and try to understand how the best minds in the world have led their life and how did they handle the situations in their life. We get to the introduction of a few lines of introduction on poem. Invictus is actually a Latin word meaning unconquerable, or undefeated. The poem was written in 1875 and published in 1888 in his first volume of poems, Book of Verses. In the section Life and Death, echoes, after his leg was amputated and he was told by doctors that his other leg would soon meet the same fate. You just imagine the situation that at the age of 16 he was admitted to a hospital and one of his legs was amputated and he was left with only one. And the difficulty of the situation was that he was alerted by the doctors that soon the second leg would also be amputated if there is no particular medical treatment given at the right time. But God forbids, Henley sought the help of another doctor who was ultimately able to salvage his another leg. Invictus was written while he was recovering in the infirmary. Infirmary means hospital, and shows how he never lost hope and kept faith in himself while facing his struggles. So, as the introduction goes, we find that it is the Henley who has trained his mind himself. There were no counselors, and there is no reference in the text lines of the poems that he was supported by somebody else, or there were some counselors in the hospital who counseled him how to live with one leg or perhaps uh, without both the legs. But we find that his own training, his own counseling to his mind and soul helped him to survive through all those odd situations of life. And the poem, we will shortly go by the text. The poem doesn't talk about any complaint. Even after these many difficult situations, we find that the poem doesn't talk about any complaint towards life, and there is no comparison even made between the situation Henley is facing and might be any other man, because there were so many beds around him in the hospital and they all were suffering from one or the other kind of illness. So Henley doesn't send any comparison in the text. Rather, each line gives us that how one after another step of life or phase of life, Henley matured himself, how he caught, how he tried to catch hold of his strength of mind and spirit in order to defeat these situations. So this is perhaps the best poems, one of the best poems you should read when you are surrounded by some difficult situations and need some kind of support or counsel. Henley's poem itself is a kind of poem given by a counselor, that I feel. Well, let us go by the text of the poem. And the poem begins like, out of the night that covers me. See, each word is suggestive of the situation Henley faced in his life. So the first line, when we find that, there is a word like out of the night that covers me. So night itself is a symbol. Night suggests darkness, and here, for Henley's life, that night suggests the darkness of life. Basically, the most difficult situations that have encountered him right from his younghood, from the age of 16. And does it mean that he is surrounded by the darkness, and now he is talking about out of darkness. Okay, one of the out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole. The reference from pole to pole, that means from north pole to south pole. That means throughout the we can say that the entire life of the poet was like surrounded by darkness, because there were no moments of happiness for him to experience and to share or to talk to somebody else and enjoy or to feel pleasuresome about his life. We as human beings try to make a big soul of happiness from little bits of happenings that give us pleasure. And but in case of Henley, we find that this is not his fate to enjoy or to get involved in any event that brought him a little happiness from the his younghood. The color, now just remember that night is the first word that appears in the first line of the poem, that suggests darkness, and in the second line there is another word we find, that is black. black as the pit from pole to pole, from north pole to south pole, and it was more like a pit full of darkness from where it was almost impossible to see the world outside or to observe the beauty of nature or the beauty of life itself. And he says further, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable souls. So if we go for the in-depth analysis of the third line, while he says that I thank whatever gods may be. So, being a British poet, he was mainly brought up in a Christian environment at home. And as everyone has his or her own particular god or religion from where we receive this spiritual strength. So, instead of referring to Jesus, Henley here makes it a point that whatever gods may be, so he doesn't want to thank any particular god, or he doesn't make a reference to Jesus even, that it was because of Jesus that he could get the inner strength of the spirit, or his mind was energized, or his mind was made ready to fight with all the difficult situations. So this is something like, he is expressing some kind of non-belief on the existence of God. And it can be surely said that he was an atheist. It is because there is a doubt over the existence of the God. The other side of the line says that if there were any gods, and if they were to support human life, or they were to support that there should be no complication or conflict or undesirable experiences to a human being, then the God would never give it to you. I'll give you another line of explanation, that is, when we study literature, that is English literature, we are always an inch away from the Bible. And because most of the English romantic poets are, they have received their inspiration from the biblical incidences, and they specifically believe in the teachings of the Bible. So every time, what do the poets or the writers in British era want to convey is, every time we commit a mistake and then we repent over it, or we make some confessions in a church, and then we are led to a correct path of life. So what do they believe is, whenever we are given to a wrong path, whenever we commit some sin, whenever we commit some wrongdoings, it is actually the God who leads you to the wrong paths, for the reason the God wants himself to be missed, or a human being is reminded of the existence of the God. So, what do the romantic writers think is, whenever we commit a wrongdoing, whenever we commit a sin, it is actually planned by the God so that he is remembered, he is missed. The logic is, unless there is a difficult situation from where rescue seems impossible, we don't miss God. Most often whenever we are given to, whenever we face a difficult situation, it is very naturally that, oh God, that comes from our mind. Okay, the mind suggests you to remember God so that you can be rescued from the difficult situation. And here Henley should have made a direct reference to Jesus, but that doesn't happen. So we find that Henley's, making a reference to I thank whatever gods may be. We find that he's actually trying to, enlarge the canvas of the supernatural existence of the God, whatever gods may be. They may be from the British area, they may be, I mean, gods of any religion, and he thanks it, in a point blank manner. He doesn't want to give the credit of the energy of his mind to a particular god. uh, I fear whether he would find it, like a kind of injustice to other gods. And because there is a basic or a fundamental understanding in his mind that there was no particular god who helped me to fight this situation, to come above all the odds in life. Okay, that is what the meaning is. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul, and that is where the title suits. Invictus. That means unconquerable. He feels that his soul was unconquerable, and this energy, this strength, we can say the inner strength of mind and soul, was granted to him perhaps by a god. He doesn't name the god, that is very strange and surprising too. Okay, but he is thankful to the gods. And there is a slight reference while we end the first stanza of the poem. He might be in a dilemma whether to reject particularly or completely the existence of the God, or at the back of his mind, or at the fundamentals, while he gives credit of his unconquerable soul. He wants to keep a little space for the existence of the God. Therefore, he has made a point blank reference that whatever gods may be. Okay, so there could be some gods who might have helped him for fighting with the difficult situations also. Okay, the next stanza. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. Just notice the word, the fell clutch of circumstances. So the fell clutch is actually a tight grip of all the conflict, the tight grip of the difficulties, the grip of the unconquerable situations that have surrounded the life of William Henley. So he calls that the appearance or the coming of the difficult situations was like a clutch of situations basically, and the circumstances could have never been conquered unless I had a very, very positive and strong mind and soul. I mean, at his credit. So this is perhaps because of his own will. We will discuss further that how does it happen. It is his own will, and that helped him to conquer all the situations. And how do we live our own individual lives? So that is what the question is. How do we live? Whether we live by complaining all the time, whether we live by enjoying it all the time, or whether we create a mixture of the events which bring us pleasure or sometimes sorrows of life. So perhaps, Henley wants to suggest that even if there is a continual source of difficulties coming to your life, it is possible that you can conquer and live a much better life. Okay, and there is no reference whether one of your leg is amputated or whether you are suffering from an incurable disease. Okay, that hardly matters. What Henley wants to convey to the readers is that all situations, rather make it more specific, all odd situations in life can be won over, and it is made possible by the inner strength of the mind, and it is possible. We will make it more particular that every human being, every individual has his or her own strengths of mind that allows us to fight with the situations and come up as a winner overall. So we find that, excuse me, I haven't winced nor cried aloud. So, what is the meaning of the wince? We find that it's a kind of reaction to the situations. Now, what happens sometimes, whenever we are whenever we are surrounded by some difficult situations, and we find that it is almost impossible to come above, or it is almost impossible to resolve the situations. There could be your own diminishing, there could be your own defeat. So wincing is something like you cut short yourself, so because you believe that you cannot win. So that is what the wincing. And crying aloud is basically a big complaint towards life. And at the same time we may sometimes blame God also, that it is he who has served me all these situations. So let us not make such a kind of what we can say, the inference from the life situations. Rather, let us try to have a possible situation, a possible solution to a particular difficult situation. So Henley wants to basically suggest every reader, every individual on the earth, that it is possible to fight all situations if you decide to fight. That is what the meaning is, and that is what the soul of the poem is. So Henley's basic emphasis is on fighting, not on complaining, or just to describe that, oh, I am surrounded by yet another difficult situation. Let us not find it so. Let Henley's poem guide us that it is possible to win over every difficult situation in human life. Okay. The third line of second stanza. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. My head is bloody. That is, his life was full of some or the other kind of bloodshed. So here there is no reference to the blood which might have been spilled, in the hospital when one of his leg was amputated. This is just a passing reference to the criticality of the situations he faced in his lifetime in the hospital. And it is not only the pain of the body, it is the pain of the mind too, it is the pain of the soul also. We find that most often, we seek some kind of spiritual guidance from spiritual gurus in life. And nowadays it has become more than a fashion just to have a spiritual guide always with you, or to read one or the other good thoughts whenever we wake up in the morning. Okay, and if they are given by a spiritual guru, that adds a little strength when we start walking away from home, and we survive throughout the day. Sometimes we pass these thoughts over to a close friend or to neighbors, or sometimes to our mates too in a family life. So that is in order to restore people to their happy period of life. What he says, under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. The last word, unbowed, that means he did not surrender. He did not surrender to the complexities of life. He did not surrender to the conflicts of life. He did not surrender to the amputation in the hospital. He did not surrender to what the doctors said while his second leg was to be amputated. So we find that the poem, and I mean, each line is full of lot of meanings towards life. Each line is full of energy that charges you, that fills your mind, body, and soul with equal amount of energy which Henley might have experienced when he was in the hospital or wrote these poems. Bludgeoning is actually a severe beating. I mean, when a human limb is beaten, you know, incessantly. I mean, there are no limits. The bloodshed which creates a different scene of cruelty. That cruelty was actually of the cruelty of situations with William Henry, and he was continuously beaten, as we could get through the introduction of his life in the beginning. His youthfulness was completely demolished. We can say that it was devastated because of his long period in the hospital for a treatment of tuberculosis. Okay, so the last line of second stanza ends with his unconquerable spirit. Again, we find that the first stanza also ended with a line, for my unconquerable soul. The second stanza also has a word, I remain unbowed. So each stanza has it is stuffed with lot of meanings, it is stuffed with lot of energy, and it is ready for a delivery to every reader. Whosoever reads the poem shall experience this strength and energy, and will also get possible lessons of how to handle difficult situations in life. My head is bloody but unbowed. So what he wants to say is, there was every possible loss to my life, there was every possible devastation of my youthful period. There was every possible demolishing of my aspirations and my expectations from life in the beginning or the youthful period of my life, but I remained unbowed. I did not surrender to any of the situations, and this all has come from his own mind. That is to be remembered. He has not credited this conquering. He has not credited this victory to any god, not to any human being, not to doctors, not to his friends, and nobody. It is his own will. Shortly, we will get to the how he credits all these happenings to his own mind. The third stanza, beyond this place of wrath and tears, wrath means anger, and tears is the sorrowful situation of life, looms but the horror of the shade. And this is not perhaps enough for his life. His particular years spent in hospital, the surgeries, the doctor's negative impact on his mind, perhaps this was not enough. So, what he talks about, beyond this place of wrath and tears, of course, and it was but natural that he could develop enough anger towards his own life. He could shed enough amount of tears. He wept over his own situation. He wept over the fate of his life. But there was always a silver line. There was always a ray of hope that he himself developed and allowed to shine before anything else, before all the negativity of life. Beyond this place of wrath and tears, this place is basically the hospital. The place of wrath and tears looms, but the horror of the shade. Looms means a particular futuristic situation. He always found that this was not perhaps the end of the conflicts. This was not perhaps the end of the possible devastation of his life. There may be certain more difficult situations yet to come, and I should be ready for that. So a looming situation will also be basically a situation full of difficulties. There will be equal conflicts. Therefore he uses the word looms, things that are to come. Looms, but the horror of shade. In the text, the word horror is written with the first letter capital. That means it encompasses almost every possible horror that could be faced by an individual on this earth, and perhaps a suggestion that whatever I faced was not enough. Perhaps there are more difficult situations that will come to my way, and this is what he finds that it is looming and that will come very soon. And yet the menace, the third and fourth line, and yet the menace of the years. Menace is the trouble, menace of the years. Finds and shall find me unafraid. Finds and shall find me unafraid. What does it mean? Unafraid, that I will not bow my head. I will remain fearless to whatever situations that come to my life. Yet the menace of the years, that means the futuristic years may not possibly the years of happiness. The futuristic years will not perhaps be the years of good expectations. The years to come shall not serve perhaps a single moment of joy to my life. But I am ready to fight. I have a spirit that is colored by fearlessness of my mind and soul. And this fearlessness will actually allow me to fight almost every possible situation in my life. Uh, uh, see, I'm going back to the first stanza, reading the concluding line of the first stanza. All stanzas are in 4 lines. The concluding line of the first stanza is, "For my unconquerable soul." The second stanza ends with, "My head is bloody, but I remain unbowed." And the ending line of the third stanza is, "Finds and shall find me unafraid." So we have an ending of each stanza that gives us a very strength, a very positive strength of the mind of Henry. And the last stanza now, "It matters not how straight the gate." It matters not. That means the fearlessness which is expressed in the previous stanza continues to the next stanza. All stanzas are connected with the same energy and positive attitude towards life. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. Henley is talking about those tight compartments of difficulties of life from where he has to make a way ahead. He says, no matter. The gates could be perhaps crampy. The gates would not allow me to pass through. The gates would have perhaps some additional situations so that my getting ahead can be blocked. But as I have decided that I have an unconquerable soul, as I have decided that I have an unbowed spirit, I have decided that I have a victorious mind within me that will help me to pass through even the cramped gates which are designed by the fate for. That is what the meaning is. How charged with punishment the scroll is basically, as we often say, that everybody's fate is written. Okay, this is written perhaps by the gods or perhaps by any other supernatural entity, as you believe, or some people believe like that. Okay, it's everybody's choice whether they believe in fate or not. When some people talk about luck, some people talk about fortune, some people, those who are very simple going, they talk about the coincidences in life. They find that there is no fate, there is no luck, there is no fortune. It is all about the coincidences of life. So that is the simplified way to understand what fortune or luck for an individual is. We find that the charge, how charged with punishment the scroll. He says that my fate is written perhaps by a supernatural being, and the scroll, that means the page on which all these situations are written, they are charged with punishments. So I do not have a choice to come out of the scroll because it is already written by the supernatural beings, and things would happen to my life as they are written. As many of us believe that things happen to our life as they are decided or designed by the supernatural beings, possibly by God. But as I said earlier, it is everybody's choice to believe whether there is a God or a supernatural being who guides or monitors or controls happenings in our life. It is beyond choice. How charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. The last two lines are very important. As we could see that the earlier three stanzas end with the same unconquering spirit of the of the poet. Last two lines, I am the master of my fate. What does Henley say? He is the master of his fate. So, at the concluding lines of the poem, there is a total rejection of the existence of God. There is a total rejection of that there could be something like a fortune or luck which is written by a supernatural being. He rejects everything. Therefore, he says that I am the master. Whereas many other would say that God is the master of their life, or supernatural beings are the masters of their life, and they write as what to happen to our life. But here Henley says that I am the master of my fate, and the happenings in my life would be decided by me only, and that is his own choice. He has decided not to bend. He has decided not to surrender. He has decided not to get frightened over the appearance of in a difficult situation. And that is how he says, he makes it very, very clear that I am the master of my fate and I am the captain of my soul. So the metaphor which is used as captain of my soul, it is actually like, we can relate this like there are captains of the ship. They are in the control. They are the masters. They decide how should the ship travel. They decide how and which direction to take while they seafare. They decide what things to operate. They decide on almost everything that happens on a ship. So we can compare that our journey of life is like a ship, and we should be the captain. He doesn't say that we should hand over the control to somebody else, or we should have complete faith in God, and sooner or later he will correct everything in our life. He doesn't say like that. He has a very clear and firm opinion on that I am the master of life, I am the master of the ship of the journey of my life. So the concluding lines give a perfect suitability to the title of the poem Invictus, that remains unconquerable. From the text of the poem, we find that Henley has to convey not the difficulties of his life, not the conflicts of his life, not the sorrows of his life, but the positive side of the life that helped him to come above all the difficult situation, and it is his own mind and spirit that suggested him to come over like a victorious individual, to come like a warrior who fights against all odds and brings victory to his team, to his state, or to his kingdom. That is what the meaning is. and in the next session we will study another poem or a lesson. Okay. Till then, goodbye.